The evening began simply, without the weight of expectation, without the grand gestures that often surround important moments in life. I had invited Elena to dinner because I wanted her company, because the idea of sharing a meal in a quiet setting felt like the kind of calm my heart had been seeking. The world outside my window was rushing, loud, and restless, but inside, I wanted to create a space where time would slow down, where conversation would mean more than the ticking of the clock. I set the table carefully, not with extravagance, but with attention. 2 plates, polished glasses, and candles that I hoped would cast a warm glow across the evening. When she arrived, carrying a small box of chocolates as if she couldn't come empty-handed, my chest filled with a warmth that had nothing to do with the food in the oven or the candles flickering on the table. "You didn't need to bring anything," I said softly as she stepped inside. She smiled in that way of hers that always felt like an answer to questions I hadn't asked. "I know, but I thought you deserved something sweet." It was such a simple gesture, but it stayed with me even as we sat down to eat. She noticed the details. The folded napkins, the faint music playing in the background, the way the candles made the shadows on the wall stretch and dance. She laughed when her fork refused to hold onto the salad leaves, and I found myself laughing too, not at the stubborn salad, but at her laughter itself. There was something so effortless in the way she filled the room, as though her presence alone gave everything a different kind of light. As the dinner continued, the conversation shifted. At first it was about everyday things, the small talk that fills silence, but soon she began to share more of herself. She spoke of her childhood, of afternoons spent watching the rain, how she would press her forehead against the window pane and trace the drops sliding down the glass. She told me how quiet moments always stayed with her more than loud celebrations. There was something in her voice, soft and reflective, that made me want to keep listening. "And you?" she asked after a while, leaning forward as though my answer would matter more than the food between us. "What do you dream about?" I hesitated. Few people had ever asked me that and waited for an honest answer. But with her, I didn't feel the need to hide. "I dream of something constant," I said at last. "Something that doesn't fade with time. A memory that stays, a bond that doesn't slip away when life gets noisy." She held my gaze for a long moment, her eyes warm, her silence full of understanding. Finally she whispered, "That's rare. Most people chase after change. You want something lasting." Her words settled in me, gentle yet weighty, and I knew she had seen something I often kept hidden. The meal grew cold on the plates, but neither of us cared. We were feasting on something else entirely. The exchange of truths, the weaving together of 2 lives through shared words. I told her about nights when loneliness crept in quietly, about how sometimes I felt like I was searching for something unnamed. And instead of brushing it off or changing the subject, she listened with a depth that surprised me. At one point, the lights flickered from a power surge, and for a brief moment, we sat in darkness with only the soft candlelight between us. In that dim glow, her face seemed different, not just beautiful, but illuminated by something deeper, something that made my heart beat slower and faster all at once. "This dinner," I said, almost surprising myself with my own honesty, "feels like more than just a meal." Her lips curved into a thoughtful smile. "What does it feel like to you?" I searched for words, but none felt enough. Finally, I said, "It feels like a beginning, like something I'll remember long after tonight is gone." Her eyes glistened, and for a second, I thought I saw in them the same realization stirring within me. "Then let's make it a memory worth holding on to," she said quietly, and in that moment I knew she felt it too. When dinner ended, we stepped outside for a walk. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of jasmine from nearby gardens. The world around us had quieted, as though even the city had stepped back to give us space. We walked side by side, our steps unhurried, and though words fell away, the silence between us felt rich and full. At one point, she stopped, tilting her head to the sky. "Do you see that cluster of stars?" she asked, pointing upward. "They say stars form shapes to tell us stories. And what story do you think that one is telling?" I asked, curious to see how her mind would shape the night. She thought for a moment, then smiled softly. "Maybe it's about 2 people whose paths were never really separate, only waiting for the right moment to cross." Her words struck me more deeply than she could have known, as if she had spoken aloud the thought I hadn't dared to voice. I didn't reply, not because I disagreed, but because sometimes silence carries more truth than words. We walked further, speaking little, yet understanding much. The world felt still, and though the night stretched on, I wished it would never end. By the time we returned, the candles had burned down to small pools of wax. The plates remained mostly untouched, but I felt more nourished than I had in years. When she stood at the doorway to leave, holding the box of chocolate she had brought, she paused and looked at me. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" I asked softly. "For tonight. For listening. For making space for me." I smiled, though my chest ached with the heaviness of knowing the evening was ending. "It's me who should thank you. You've turned this night into something I'll never forget." She looked at me for a long moment, as if deciding whether to say more, then gave me a smile that carried both tenderness and promise. Without another word, she stepped into the night, her figure fading slowly down the quiet street. I stood there long after she was gone, as if holding on to the echo of her presence. The house was silent, yet filled with her in every corner. The candles, the plates, the music, all of it was still there, but none of it mattered compared to the feeling she left behind. When I think back to that evening now, I realize it wasn't the food, the wine, or even the laughter that made it unforgettable. It was the honesty we shared, the vulnerability that came without warning, the bond that formed quietly but firmly across a table lit by candles. It was knowing that for one night, time slowed down enough for me to see what I had been searching for all along. It had been just a quiet dinner, nothing grand, nothing staged, but it became a memory carved into my heart, one I could never let fade. And sometimes when the nights grow lonely again, I close my eyes and return to that table, to the flicker of candles, to the sound of her laughter, to the feeling of being seen, truly seen, for the first time. That is why it became a memory I can't forget.